Okay, go ahead. Hello, my name is Crystal Peinado, and I'm going to be giving you a presentation on nonverbal communication in the workplace. There's lots of different forms of nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is any sort of communication that doesn't involve words, and the four I'm going to be speaking with you about today are facial expressions, gestures, paralinguistics, and eye contact. The first one is facial expressions, and we are theorized to have evolved facial expressions. So we actually have facial expressions that surpass cultural differences to explicitly express 6 different emotions. However, facial expressions can still be easily misinterpreted. For example, if I'm having a parent-teacher conference and I furrow my brow, the parent could interpret that as frustration or anger. However, I could be thinking about something else, like some bad news I just received, or if I feel sick. So that's one example of how facial expressions can be misinterpreted. Another misinterpretation of facial expressions is when we consider the impact of extrinsic stimuli, such as light, noise, or odor. If I'm having a conversation with a student and I smell a foul odor, I can crinkle up my nose and squint my eyes. This could perhaps indicate displeasure or annoyance with the person I'm talking to, the student, when in actuality, my displeasure is with the foul odor that I'm smelling. Another example of nonverbal communication are gestures, which are absolutely not a universal language, and we should never assume meaning or mere gestures that we don't know the meaning to. Americans often rely on gestures to communicate because generally Americans only speak one language. So we rely on gestures instead of utilizing another language. However, gestures can often be misinterpreted, often infamously, such as when George Bush gave a peace sign to a group of Australians. However, his palm was faced in instead of out, and because his palm was faced in, he was actually flipping off the group of Australians instead of giving the peace sign. Another example of a gesture that was misinterpreted is when an Iranian reporter threw his shoes at George W. Bush. George W. Bush said that this was one of the oddest events of his presidency. However, if he was familiar with Iranian culture, he would know that this is actually a sign of contempt in Iranian culture. Another gesture that's often misinterpreted is when people speak with their hands. In a white American culture, this is perceived as something that's a little bit aggressive or something that would be deemed unprofessional. However, in Latin American culture, speaking with your hands shows passion or shows engagement in a conversation or topic. The next one that I would like to speak about is paralinguistics, which greatly differs between culture. Think of not what is said, but how something is said. So this is something like tone of voice, volume, speed, interrupting, pauses. Here's a Japanese proverb that says, "Those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know," compared with an American perception of silence, which is perhaps that long silences are often uncomfortable or awkward. So this is an example of where there could be a pretty significant miscommunication between someone who's coming from a Japanese culture and someone who is coming from an American culture. The last one that I would like to speak with you about is eye contact, which also greatly aligns with cultures. American and European cultures promote constant eye contact, especially in business situations. However, in a more intimate public situation, like in the restroom or on a bus, eye contact is discouraged. In the Middle East, eye contact is always discouraged, always between members of the opposite sex, and generally it's also discouraged between people of the same sex. It needs to be very fleeting. Also, fleeting eye contact is promoted in Asian cultures, especially when you are addressing an elder. You should not maintain eye contact because it indicates disrespect. In African and Latin American cultures, solid eye contact indicates aggression or challenge of authority. And finally, in Native American cultures, it actually greatly differs between tribes. Some tribes interpret eye contact as being respectful, and others interpret it as being threatening. There's a famous experiment where people want to promote eye contact between people to reestablish our human connection, when really this is another example of Americans being very ethnocentric and thinking that, their one way is the way that things should be, that we should have eye contact and we shouldn't speak with our hands, and that's something that is more professional. but that's a very arrogant way of perceiving professionalism, because we are thinking that it's our way or the highway. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation on nonverbal communication. Please remember that this is something as educators that we always need to be thinking about, because sometimes what we don't say is more powerful than what we do say. Thank you.